This is Ken Smith welcoming you to our Bringing a Message radio programme, brought to you by the By All Means Gospel Trust in Solihull, United Kingdom. Today, Maurice Payne continues a series of messages entitled Pictures of Jesus in John's Gospel, and we are looking at Jesus preaching at the feast, as found in chapter 7. This was a wonderful day he spent at the Feast of Tabernacles, and we think you will be blessed as you listen to this message. Hilary is reading the scriptures and making the closing announcement. Music is by Peter Jackson and singers. We are always pleased to hear from our listeners, so why not write or email us today? Our address is Bringing a Message, BAM Gospel Trust, Box 7778, Solihull, B92 7AG, United Kingdom. And our email address is info@bringingamessage.org. We shall repeat both of these addresses at the close of the programme. Stay tuned for today's message.
In the 7th chapter of John's Gospel, we find Jesus preaching at the annual Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. For about 6 months previously, Jesus had been working and ministering in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea, where opposition had risen and the Jews were waiting to take his life. Not only was Jesus led of the Spirit into the wilderness immediately after his baptism in the River Jordan, he was led of the Spirit throughout his earthly ministry. He knew that the time had not come for him to die, so he avoided Judea these 6 months or so. Also, his itinerary in Galilee gave Jesus opportunity to preach the gospel to those in the north of the country. So, chapter 7 describes how Jesus went up to the feast, what he said, and the reaction he received.
Not until halfway through the feast did Jesus go up to the temple courts and begin to teach. The Jews were amazed and asked, "How did this man get such learning without having studied?" Verses 14 and 15.
On the one hand, we see the scheming of those who wanted to do away with him. On the other, the effect of his preaching upon those who believed. Now it's the same today. Preaching Christ divides the hearers into those who accept and those who reject. Look first at those who did not believe, the brothers of Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew gives us the names of 4 of Jesus' brothers in the flesh: James, Joseph, Simon and Judas, and mentions his sisters. And it would be these brethren who, when everyone was making their way to Jerusalem, urged Jesus to go up to the feast. John writes that they did this because even his own brothers didn't believe on him. His brothers said that Jesus should go up to Jerusalem that his disciples might believe. On the one hand, they wanted Jesus, a member of their family, to succeed, and probably envisaged him performing a spectacular miracle in Jerusalem that would confirm to the world his place as Messiah. On the other, they found it difficult to accept that their elder brother, with whom they had grown up, was the long-promised Christ. The Gospel draws attention to the unbelief of his brethren, and we should note that Jesus did not accede to their desire for him to show himself to the world. He told them to go up. His time had not yet come. He'd go up to Jerusalem later. This he did after his brothers had left, and along what we may picture as deserted roads, or not publicly but in secret, as John describes it in the 10th verse. We see here then how Jesus did not bow to untimely pressure in order that those who didn't believe in him might be encouraged to do so. Following his Father's will was of greater importance than trying to convince the doubters. And also, those who didn't believe were the critics he met on his arrival. Arriving well after the 7-day Feast of Tabernacles had started, Jesus was able to enter the temple court unrecognized by the Jews who had laid in wait for him. When he began to teach halfway through the feast, the Jews were amazed at what they heard. They asked,
"How did this man get such learning, having never studied?"
Their question illustrates how those who do not want to believe find reason for not doing so, as though the absence of a recognized course of education means a person can't get inspiration from heaven. We know that this world's wisdom can distort the truths of God, but Jesus' answer put them in their place.
"My teaching is not my own. It comes from him who sent me."
And we know that the teaching that caused such offence to the religious leaders among the Jews were words that the ordinary people received gladly. And another group who didn't believe, the authorities who'd set out to kill him. The people in Jerusalem knew that the authorities had planned to kill and thereby silence Jesus. Jesus himself faced the Jews with the question,
"Why are you trying to kill me?" Verse 19 of John chapter 7.
Jesus continued teaching in the temple courts. He told them that they knew where he was from and they knew who had sent him, at which point we read they tried to seize him. However, no one laid a hand on him because the time had not come for him to be crucified. Jesus' ministry needed to fulfill its course. Soon he would be taken by wicked hands and slain, crucified as an atoning sacrifice for the sin of the world. But any attempt to take him before that time had arrived would be futile. A similar situation arose when he was preaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. There his hearers were offended and tried to push him over a precipice. On that occasion we read that he just walked through the midst of them. Perhaps something similar happened to prevent them seizing him here as he preached in the temple courts. Then, among those who didn't believe, were those sent to arrest him. We read that
the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Verse 32.
This was when they heard people in the crowd murmuring things like, "When Christ comes, will he do more miraculous things than this man?" Sending these temple guards was their latest effort to silence the ministry of Jesus once and for all. But God took care of it that the ministry of Jesus was not silenced, and that he completed the work that he'd been sent to do, and salvation became a reality, and folk all over the world these many years later are receiving and blessed by his teaching and ministry. The concerted effort made to silence the voice of Jesus at the Feast of Tabernacles came to nothing. About his own brethren who didn't believe in him, it should be said that we have every evidence that they came wholeheartedly to believe after the resurrection and ascension. For among those in the upstairs room, when the disciples waited for the promised Holy Spirit, we read,
"These all joined in prayer, along with the women and Mary the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers." Acts 1 verse 14.
Now, having looked at those who didn't believe, let's look at the believing element in that crowd long ago. They were found in the crowd that flocked into Jerusalem at that Feast of Tabernacles, those who heard and believed. First, the many who put their faith in him. In verse 31 we read,
"Still many in the crowd put their faith in him."
That word "still" is important because it confirms what we might think, namely, that while there was confusion among the people, open hostility from the rulers and spiritual leaders, and even his own brethren harboured doubts about their brother, Jesus, there were many who changed direction. They went against this tide of unbelief and opposed any attempt to kill him. One version says, "But there were many," and another says, "Yet there were many." It seems that a large number of those at the Feast of Tabernacles who heard Jesus in the temple courts put their faith in him. They believed. Belief is an exercise of faith, and faith is a God-given gift. It is trust which, when used, enables us to lean or rest upon another person or thing. So, to trust wholly is to rest completely, or put all one's weight or care upon another. These who believed had come a long way from the discussion and questioning about him that had gone on before Jesus appeared. Earlier in the chapter we read that there was widespread whispering about him. Some said he's a good man. Expressing this opinion, right though it is not of itself faith, nor is it putting one's trust in that man. Then, as Jesus continued to speak about his mission, the people asked,
"Have the authorities really concluded that he is the Christ?"
But even concluding that Jesus is the Christ isn't trusting or putting your faith in him. Later on, some of the people said, "Surely this man is the prophet," and others said, "He is the Christ." This was after Jesus had cried, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." The people were divided in their opinion, but the important division was between those who believed and those who did not. Jesus said,
"Whoever believes in me, streams of living water will flow from within him."
And then, the temple guards sent to arrest him became believers. Isn't that wonderful? The greatest change that took place that day was in the temple guards sent by the chief priests and Pharisees to arrest Jesus. We're not told that they believed, but their actions suggest they did. They were guards, and therefore used to taking and obeying orders. Here was a case when they disobeyed, and any punishment that might be meted out to them seemed of little consequence compared to the conclusion they reached. Listen to what it says about them.
"No one ever spoke the way this man does."
For that reason, they didn't apprehend him. These guards were not asked to form an opinion, they were asked to arrest him. The words of Jesus were so powerful that they convicted these men. Sent to arrest him, his words arrested them. They returned to those who'd sent them and said in effect, "We believe what Jesus says rather than what you tell us." Now the words of Jesus are powerful today, equally powerful as they were in the